By the way, my name is Mike. If you told me a year ago that I'd be spilling my guts to strangers on the internet, I'd have laughed it off. But here I am, because life has this way of throwing curveballs you never see coming. Let me set the scene. I'm 37, living what most people would call the dream life. My best friend Matt and I have known each other since we were kids. We grew up in the same small neighborhood, shared countless adventures, and always had each other's backs. As luck would have it, we both hit the jackpot in life. We started a tech company right out of college, and after years of hard work, it took off. Big time. Now we're living it up in a sprawling penthouse with a private golf course and pool, all nestled on the edge of a city that looks even better when lit up at night. The place is massive, 10 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a home theater, and even a wine cellar I barely know how to use. We've got matching sports cars in the garage, a kitchen straight out of a cooking show, and a view that makes you stop and take it all in every time you step onto the balcony. The best part? It's not just Matt and me living here. My wife Jessica, Matt's girlfriend Alexis, and our 2 sons make it all feel like one big family. Jessica and Alexis are best friends, practically inseparable, and our sons are like brothers, always running around causing some kind of mischief. It's the kind of life people dream about but rarely get to live. Matt and I have always had this unspoken bond. We grew up with nothing, and now we have everything. We share the same values, the same drive, and even the same twisted sense of humor. He's more than a business partner. He's my brother in every way that counts. We built this life together, and it's a point of pride that we made it work without sacrificing our friendship. Jessica and I met in college, and she's been the love of my life ever since. She's strong-willed, beautiful, and has this energy that can light up a room. Alexis is younger and bubbly, the kind of person who makes you laugh even when you don't feel like it. Together, Jessica and Alexis are a force of nature, always planning something, whether it's a spa day, redecorating the penthouse, or taking our boys to the latest amusement park. We all function like a well-oiled machine. Sure, there are disagreements here and there. Matt can be a bit too laid back, and Jessica has this perfectionist streak that drives her crazy if the smallest thing is out of place. But we've always been able to hash things out. Life seemed perfect. No, scratch that, it was perfect. At least until a few weeks ago, when I started noticing cracks in the foundation. Small things at first. Jessica was staying up late, whispering on her phone in the corner of the living room. Matt was a little more tense than usual, always brushing off conversations about expanding the business. Alexis, normally cheerful, seemed distracted, lost in her own world. It was subtle, like the hum of an engine that's just slightly off, but enough to make you take notice. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Stress from work, maybe. We were about to finalize a huge deal that could triple our company's value, and tension was running high for all of us. But the feeling wouldn't go away. I started catching Jessica in little lies, things like, "I'm heading to the mall with Alexis," when Alexis was clearly at home binge-watching reality TV. I brushed it off, not wanting to start unnecessary drama. But it wasn't just her. Matt started dodging my questions about the deal, shrugging off important details with, "Don't worry about it, man. I've got it under control." For the first time in years, our perfect life didn't feel so perfect. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that everyone was under pressure, and things would go back to normal once we closed the deal. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I'm probably overthinking it, right? After all, we've built this amazing life together. We're not just partners in business, we're family. And family doesn't keep secrets. Right. Jessica and I have this tradition. Every couple of months, we take a short trip, just the 2 of us. Don't get me wrong, I love our crazy, big, blended household. But there's something about getting away from it all that feels necessary. No business calls, no kids shouting about whose turn it is on the PlayStation, no Alexis bursting in with a bottle of wine and a "let's gossip" grin. Just us. This time, Jessica suggested Napa Valley. "We haven't been in ages," she said, running her fingers over my arm one night. Just you and me, Mike. We'll drink wine, eat amazing food, and forget about everything for a while. She had this sparkle in her eye that reminded me of when we first met, and I couldn't say no. Besides, things had been tense lately, work stress, some distance between us, and that nagging feeling I couldn't shake. A trip might be exactly what we needed. So, we packed our bags and left the chaos of the penthouse behind, flying out to California for a 3-day escape. Jessica had booked us a suite at this stunning vineyard resort. The place was picture-perfect, rolling hills covered in grapevines, a quaint villa with balconies overlooking the valley, and a vibe so peaceful it felt like stepping into another world. From the moment we arrived, Jessica was in full vacation mode. She wore this flowy white dress that made her look like she belonged on the cover of a travel magazine. At dinner, she ordered us a bottle of their best red wine and smiled across the table like nothing in the world could bother her. For the first time in weeks, I started to relax. Maybe I'd been overthinking everything. The first day was perfect. We wandered through the vineyard, took a private tour of the wine cellar, and even stomped grapes together like a scene out of a rom-com. Jessica laughed the whole time, her carefree attitude contagious. By the time the sun set, I'd almost forgotten about the tension back home. But that night something shifted. We were lying in bed, and Jessica was scrolling on her phone. She always does this before bed, but this time, it felt different. Every few minutes, she'd smile faintly or stifle a laugh. When I leaned over to look, she angled the screen away. "Who's that?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Just Alexis," she replied without missing a beat. "She's sending me pictures of some outfits she bought. You know how she is." I nodded and rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. Maybe it was Alexis. But something about the way Jessica's fingers flew across the screen didn't sit right with me. She was never that animated when chatting with Alexis, who usually just bombarded her with emojis and TikTok links. I told myself to let it go. We were on vacation, after all. The second day, it was harder to ignore. During breakfast on the balcony, Jessica kept glancing at her phone, her fork hovering over her plate as if she were lost in thought. When I asked her a question about our plans for the day, she didn't even hear me. "Jess," I said louder, and she jolted, nearly dropping her phone. "Sorry!" She laughed nervously, slipping the phone into her pocket. "What were you saying?" I forced a smile. "Just asking if you wanted to go hiking or hit the spa." "Oh, the spa, definitely. Hiking's more your thing," she said, brushing off my question like it was nothing. But her distraction stuck with me. She'd always been glued to her phone, but this felt different. By the time dinner rolled around, I couldn't take it anymore. Jessica had been sneaking glances at her phone all day. Even during our couple's massage, she jumped up halfway through to use the bathroom, taking her phone with her. My gut was doing that thing again, the twisting, churning feeling that something wasn't right. After dinner, we were sitting by the fire pit outside our suite, sipping on wine. Jessica's phone buzzed on the table. She grabbed it quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen, Matt. "Matt?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Jessica froze for a split second before shrugging. "Yeah. He was just asking about some work stuff. You know how he is, can't ever switch off." I nodded, but my mind was racing. Work stuff? Matt knew better than to interrupt our trips unless it was urgent. And he hadn't mentioned needing anything from me before we left. I decided to press a little. "What's so urgent that he's texting you during dinner?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Jessica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing, babe. Just some numbers he wanted to double-check for the new deal. You don't need to worry about it." That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Jessica was lying. I could see it in the way she avoided my gaze, the way she immediately changed the subject to how beautiful the stars looked. My chest tightened, but I swallowed the anger bubbling up inside me. This wasn't the time or place for a confrontation. Not yet. That night, while Jessica slept, I couldn't help myself. I reached for her phone on the nightstand, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. But it was password protected, something she'd never done before. I stared at the screen, the glow of it mocking me in the dark. My heart pounded in my ears, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I didn't have proof, yet, but I could feel it in my gut. Jessica wasn't just texting Matt about work. There was something more, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face what it was. The morning after that uneasy night, I woke up to Jessica already out on the balcony, sipping her coffee and scrolling on her phone. She looked relaxed, bathed in the soft glow of the early sun, but I couldn't shake the tension that had taken root in my chest. She caught me staring and gave me a smile. "Morning, sleepyhead. I was just checking in with Alexis. She says the boys are having the time of their lives with her." I nodded, forcing a smile. "That's good." I tried to push the doubts aside as we spent the morning exploring the vineyard and taking one of those cheesy painting classes Jessica had insisted on. Still, every time her phone buzzed, I felt my heart skip a beat. She'd glance at the screen, then quickly put it away, her smile a little too forced. I told myself to relax. She'd said it was Alexis and Matt. No big deal, right? But by that evening, my curiosity was eating me alive. We had dinner in the resort's private garden, and while Jessica seemed genuinely engaged, laughing, holding my hand, even suggesting we plan a bigger getaway next month, I couldn't stop thinking about that name glowing on her phone the night before. Matt. After dinner, Jessica decided to take a shower. As she stepped into the bathroom, leaving her phone on the nightstand, my chest tightened. It was right there. I hesitated, my mind racing. Was I really going to do this? Invade her privacy? What if I was wrong? But the nagging doubt wouldn't let go. I needed to know. The sound of water running gave me the cover I needed. With trembling hands, I picked up her phone and swiped the screen. To my surprise, the lock screen wasn't password protected anymore. My stomach twisted as I opened her messages. The first thread was with Alexis, just like she'd said. I skimmed through, seeing photos of the boys at an arcade and Alexis gushing about how much fun they were having. "Thanks for letting me keep them for a bit." One message read, "You and Mike deserve some alone time." Guilt stabbed at me. Maybe I'd overreacted. But then I saw Matt's name further down the list. My fingers hovered over the chat for a second before I tapped it open. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the messages. To my relief and confusion, the conversation was entirely about work. Matt had been asking Jessica about some figures for the upcoming deal. "Can you double-check these projections with Mike?" One message read. "I don't want to miss anything when we finalize this." Jessica had responded politely, keeping the tone professional. "I'll ask him tomorrow, but I think we're on track. Don't stress." That was it. No flirting, no inside jokes, nothing suspicious. Just work. I let out a shaky breath and put the phone back, feeling equal parts relieved and ashamed. Maybe I really had been overthinking things. Jessica stepped out of the bathroom a few minutes later, a towel wrapped around her, her hair damp and wavy. "What's that look for?" she asked, smirking as she caught me staring. "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. "You look amazing, that's all." She laughed and climbed into bed beside me, her warmth chasing away the doubts that had been gnawing at me. As she curled up next to me, I told myself to let it go. Jessica wasn't hiding anything. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. The days in Napa passed like a dream. Jessica seemed more relaxed, more engaged, and for the first time in months, things felt normal between us. We toured more vineyards, laughed over dinner, and even spent an afternoon lounging by the resort pool, soaking in the quiet luxury of it all. I started to believe the trip had done its job. Whatever weirdness had been brewing before, it seemed to have melted away. By the time we got back to the penthouse, we were in good spirits. Jessica immediately dove into catching up with Alexis, and I threw myself back into work with Matt. The deal we'd been working on was in its final stages, and the hustle felt good. A few nights later, Jessica suggested we have a small get-together. "Just the two families," she said, tossing the idea out casually while we sat on the balcony. "We haven't done something like that in weeks. It'll be fun." I agreed. It sounded simple enough, Matt, Alexis, the kids, and us. A low-key evening in our penthouse, with good food, some drinks, and laughter. What could go wrong? The night of the party, everything started out fine. The kids were tearing around the place, diving in and out of the pool while Alexis chased them with a camera, trying to capture their chaos. Jessica and Alexis had set up a spread in the dining area, grilled steaks, shrimp skewers, and a ridiculous amount of appetizers. Matt was in charge of the drinks, showing off his latest bartending skills, with a shaker and some fancy cocktail recipes he'd learned online. It was the kind of night that reminded me why we'd built this life together. The laughter, the easy banter, the sense of family, it felt perfect. Or at least, it should have. As the evening wore on, I started to notice something. Matt was paying a lot of attention to Jessica. At first, it was subtle. A joke here, a compliment there. That dress looks great on you, Jess, he said at one point, and I didn't think much of it. Matt's always been a friendly guy, and compliments were just part of his personality. But as the night went on, it became more obvious. He'd laugh a little too hard at her jokes, lean in a little too close when they were talking. When Jessica went to grab something from the kitchen, he followed her, offering to help. Want another drink, Jess? He asked more than once, even when her glass was barely touched. Alexis didn't seem to notice. She was busy with the kids, chatting with Jessica whenever she passed by, and trying to wrangle everyone for a group photo. I, on the other hand, couldn't ignore it. I saw the way Matt's eyes lingered a little too long when Jessica walked past. The way he laughed a little louder, smiled a little wider when he was talking to her. It was weird. But here's the thing, I didn't care. Not really. Call it exhaustion, call it denial, or maybe I was just too burned out from weeks of suspicion and doubt. Whatever it was, I couldn't bring myself to make a big deal out of it. Jessica seemed completely oblivious to Matt's attention, treating him the same way she always did, with that friendly, easygoing charm she showed to everyone. So I let it slide. I leaned back on the couch, sipped my drink, and let the night unfold. At one point, Alexis called everyone over to the balcony for a toast. The view of the city lights stretched out before us, glittering like a sea of stars. To us, Alexis said, raising her glass. To family, to friendship, and to this crazy, beautiful life we've built. Here, here, Matt added, his arm brushing Jessica's as he lifted his glass. I clinked my glass with Jessica's and smiled. Whatever was going on, I told myself it didn't matter. The night was good, the kids were happy, and everyone seemed content. Even if Matt's laughter lingered a little too long after one of Jessica's jokes. Even if I caught him looking at her just a second too long. I just didn't care enough to do anything about it. At least, not yet. The morning after the party, the penthouse was a mess, a picturesque disaster of half-empty wine glasses, crumpled napkins, and pool toys scattered everywhere. The kids were still asleep. Alexis had gone back to her side of the penthouse with them late in the night, and Matt was passed out on one of the lounge chairs by the pool. Jessica was already up, tidying the kitchen with her usual efficiency. Well, that was fun, she said, glancing over her shoulder with a smile. We should do it again soon. Yeah, I replied, though my voice sounded less enthusiastic than I intended. My mind was still on Matt's behavior last night. Jessica noticed. You okay? She asked, setting down the dish she was rinsing. Yeah, just tired, I said, brushing it off. Too many of Matt's cocktails. She laughed, but I caught a flicker of something in her expression. Concern? Guilt? Or maybe I was reading too much into it. Again. I decided to clear my head by heading down to the business office in the building. I wanted to review some final details on the deal Matt and I were working on, and the quiet space downstairs was perfect for it. I told Jessica I'd be back in a couple of hours, kissed her on the cheek, and left. When I got to the office, I booted up my laptop and logged into the company system. Everything looked fine at first, emails, spreadsheets, the usual stuff. But then I noticed something odd. There was a draft email in the shared folder that Matt and I used for deal prep. It wasn't unusual for us to leave notes or reminders there, but this one didn't look like his usual style. It was addressed to our main client contact, detailing a significant change to the terms of the deal, something I hadn't signed off on. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Matt had been working late and accidentally uploaded the wrong version. But the more I read, the more uneasy I felt. The changes weren't minor. They significantly altered the profit distribution, in Matt's favor. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Was this a misunderstanding? A glitch? Or was Matt trying to cut me out of our own company? I picked up my phone and dialed Matt. He didn't answer, which wasn't surprising since he was probably still asleep by the pool. I considered waking him up, but something told me to hold off. If this was what I thought it was, I needed to be careful. Instead, I forwarded the draft email to my personal account, along with a few other files I found in the shared folder. Some of them were emails between Matt and the client that I hadn't been copied on. There was no smoking gun, but the tone of the messages was strange. Almost like Matt was distancing me from the conversation. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Could Matt really be trying to push me out? After everything we'd built together? When I got back to the penthouse, Jessica was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled. "Done with work already?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tying up some loose ends." I didn't tell her about the email. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what to make of it myself. Instead, I spent the rest of the day pretending everything was normal, even though my mind was anything but. Later that evening, I finally got Matt alone. He'd woken up from his nap and was lounging in the living room, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. "Hey man," I said, sitting down across from him. "Can we talk about the deal? I saw something in the shared folder that didn't make sense." Matt's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise? Annoyance? "Sure," he said casually. "What's up?" I pulled out my phone and opened the forwarded email. "This draft you uploaded. It's way off from what we agreed on. Did you mean to change the terms?" Matt glanced at the screen and shrugged. "Oh, that? Yeah, I was playing around with some ideas. Thought we might need a backup plan if the client pushes back. Didn't mean to freak you out." His explanation sounded reasonable, but his tone was too smooth. Too rehearsed. "You should have run it by me first," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is a big change." Matt waved me off. "Relax, Mike. It's nothing serious. Just an idea. I wasn't planning to send it without your okay." I nodded, but the unease didn't go away. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. That night, as Jessica and I lay in bed, I replayed the conversation in my head. Was Matt telling the truth? Or was there more going on than he was letting on? The cracks in our perfect life were starting to show, and I had a sinking feeling that they were only going to get bigger. The day after my uneasy talk with Matt, I couldn't stop thinking about that draft email. His explanation hadn't convinced me, and the more I thought about it, the more suspicious it seemed. Something wasn't adding up, and I was done ignoring the nagging feeling in my gut. I decided to start digging. If there was something going on, I needed to know. Our office assistant, Karen, had been with us from the beginning. She was sharp, reliable, and always seemed to know what was going on in the office, sometimes even more than Matt or me. If anyone could help me figure out what was happening, it was her. That morning, I called Karen and asked her to swing by the office. When she arrived, she greeted me with her usual bright smile. "What's up, Mike? Something wrong?" I closed the door behind her and gestured for her to sit. "Not wrong, exactly. Just strange. I need your help with something." Her smile faded as she sensed the seriousness in my tone. "Of course. What's going on?" I took a deep breath and leaned forward. "Do you remember the day before we left for Napa? Did anything unusual happen in the office?" Karen furrowed her brow, thinking. "Not that I can recall. The usual hustle." "Why?" I hesitated, then decided to rip off the band-aid. I found something odd on the shared folder. A draft email with changes to the deal. Matt said he was just brainstorming, but it doesn't feel right. I wanted to know if you noticed anything unusual, anyone in the office, anything out of place. She tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. Now that you mention it, there was something. But I didn't think much of it at the time. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Karen shifted in her seat, her voice dropping slightly. The day before you left, Alexis stopped by. Alexis? I blinked. Matt's wife? Yeah. She said she was looking for Matt and needed to grab something from his desk. I told her he wasn't here, but she said it was urgent. She didn't stay long, just a few minutes in his office, but what? I pressed, my heart pounding. She was using his laptop when I walked by. I didn't think much of it since she and Matt are married, but now… Karen trailed off, watching my reaction carefully. I leaned back, the wheels in my head spinning. Why would Alexis need to use Matt's laptop? And why didn't Matt mention it? Did you see what she was doing? I asked. Karen shook her head. No, but she looked a little flustered when I walked by. Like she wasn't expecting anyone to see her. Did she leave anything behind? A note, a file, anything? Karen thought for a moment, then shook her head again. Not that I saw. I figured she found what she needed and left. I didn't want to pry. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to piece it together. Matt hadn't mentioned Alexis stopping by the office. If she was just there for something innocent, why wouldn't he tell me? Karen's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Mike, do you think she… I don't know what to think, I admitted, my voice tense. But I'm going to find out. Karen nodded, her concern evident. Let me know if there's anything else I can do. Thanks, Karen, I said as she stood to leave. And keep this between us, okay? Of course, she said, giving me a reassuring smile. Good luck. After she left, I sat in silence, staring at the laptop in front of me. The puzzle pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they were forming wasn't clear yet. Why was Alexis on Matt's laptop? Was she involved in whatever was going on? Or was I grasping at straws, letting my suspicions get the better of me? One thing was certain, I wasn't going to stop until I had answers. I didn't waste any time. After Karen left, I sat at my desk for what felt like hours, thinking through my next move. The idea of confronting Matt felt like walking into a minefield, but I couldn't let this sit. If there was even a chance he was pulling something behind my back, I needed to know. The next morning, I caught Matt in the office. He was sitting at his desk, scrolling through emails with that laid-back, confident air he always had. It irritated me more than usual. Hey, Matt, I said, keeping my tone neutral. He glanced up, grinning. Morning, man. What's up? I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. We need to talk. His grin faded, replaced by a wary expression. Okay. What's going on? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. Karen mentioned something yesterday. She said Alexis came by the office while we were out of town. Used your laptop. Do you know anything about that? Matt froze for a second, then let out a short laugh. Oh, that? Yeah, she told me about it. She needed to look something up for my birthday. She didn't want to use her phone because she was worried I'd see the search history. I frowned, studying his face. He didn't seem defensive, but his explanation felt too convenient. She didn't mention it to me when I saw her, I said. Matt shrugged. Probably because it wasn't a big deal. She just didn't want me to find out about the gift. You know how Alexis gets about surprises. I nodded slowly, trying to decide if I believed him. There was no trace of guilt in his voice, no hesitation. Either he was telling the truth, or he was a better liar than I thought. What was the gift? I asked, fishing for more details. Matt grinned, leaning back in his chair. A new set of golf clubs. She's been teasing me about my old ones being ancient for months. She even let it slip when we were at the driving range last week. I didn't have the heart to tell her I already knew. His casual tone caught me off guard. If he was lying, he was doing a damn good job of it. All right, I said finally, pushing off the door. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't work-related. We can't afford any surprises with the deal coming up. Agreed, Matt said, his grin returning. But you can relax, Mike. Alexis isn't messing with work stuff. She's just obsessed with making birthdays a whole production. I forced a chuckle and left the office, my mind still spinning. If Alexis wasn't involved, then what was I missing? Later that day, Jessica dropped by the office. She claimed she was bringing me lunch, but she seemed unusually bubbly, her smile lingering just a second too long when she saw Matt. "You're here early," Matt said, his tone light but with a faint edge I couldn't ignore. "Thought I'd surprise Mike," Jessica replied, setting a takeout bag on my desk. "I know how grumpy he gets when he skips lunch." I laughed weakly, but my eyes flicked between the two of them. Their banter was always friendly, but lately it felt off. Too familiar. As Jessica turned to leave, Matt called out, "Thanks for the food, Jess. You're a lifesaver." She glanced over her shoulder, her smile just a touch too warm. "Anytime, Matt." After she was gone, I sat down, trying to focus on my work. But the strained air between the three of us hung in the room like a fog. "Jessica's in a good mood," Matt said casually, not looking up from his laptop. "Yeah," I replied, my voice clipped. "Nice to see. You guys had a good trip, huh?" "It was fine," I said, trying not to sound defensive. Matt leaned back in his chair, stretching. "That's good. You know, sometimes I think Alexis and I should do more stuff like that. It's easy to forget how important it is to reconnect." I didn't respond, focusing on the spreadsheet in front of me. But Matt's words lingered. That evening, back at the penthouse, Jessica was in high spirits again. She poured herself a glass of wine and curled up on the couch with her phone, laughing at something on the screen. "What's so funny?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just a meme Alexis sent me," she said, not looking up. I nodded and sat across from her, watching her scroll. Her phone buzzed, and she quickly tilted the screen away, glancing at me out of the corner of her eye. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Yeah, why?" she replied, her smile tightening. I forced a smile and stood, heading to the balcony to clear my head. The conversation with Matt, Jessica's behavior, the lingering doubts, they were all swirling in my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was yet. The unease had been gnawing at me ever since I talked to Matt. Something about his explanation felt too smooth, too convenient. And now, Karen's earlier comments about Alexis using Matt's laptop were rattling around in my head like loose screws. I needed answers. I called Karen the next morning. "Hey Karen, it's Mike," I said, trying to sound casual. "Can we meet again? There's something I need to follow up on about the office." Her voice was calm but tinged with curiosity. "Of course. Is everything okay?" I hesitated for a moment. "Not sure yet. But I need your help." We met at a small cafe not far from the office later that afternoon. Karen was already there when I arrived, sipping on a coffee, her expression open but concerned. I didn't waste any time. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sitting down across from her. "Of course," she replied. "What's on your mind?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You told me Alexis stopped by the office before Jessica and I went to Napa. But was she the only one who came by? Did anyone else show up that day?" Karen blinked, tilting her head as she thought. Then she frowned slightly. "Actually, yeah. Jessica came by too." My stomach dropped. "Jessica?" I repeated, my voice quieter now. Karen nodded, her brow furrowed. "Yeah, I remember because it was a little unusual. She showed up about an hour after Alexis left. I figured she needed something work-related." "What did she do?" I asked, my voice tight. Karen hesitated, glancing around like she didn't want anyone to overhear. "She went straight to Matt's office," she said. She locked the door. I froze. She locked the door? Yeah, Karen confirmed. She said she needed privacy. I didn't think much of it, figured it was something important. I mean, she's your wife, so I assumed it was fine. My mind was racing now. Did you see what she was doing? Karen shifted in her seat. I walked by the office at one point. She was on Matt's laptop, typing something. My hands tightened into fists under the table. She didn't say anything when she left? Karen shook her head. Not much. She just said thanks and left pretty quickly. She seemed, I don't know, nervous. Like she didn't want to stick around. I stared down at the table, trying to make sense of it all. Jessica, in the office, using Matt's laptop, locking the door. She never mentioned anything about being there. Why would she keep that from me? Karen's voice broke into my thoughts. Mike, is everything okay? I looked up at her, forcing a weak smile. I'm not sure yet. But thanks for telling me. This helps. Let me know if you need anything else, she said, her concern evident. Will do, I said, standing to leave. And Karen, keep this between us for now, okay? She nodded firmly. Of course. I left the cafe with my heart pounding. Jessica had secrets, and they were buried right in the middle of my life. And Matt? He wasn't off the hook either. I needed to know what the hell was going on, before it tore everything apart. I've always believed in trusting my gut, and for weeks now, it's been screaming at me that something was off. But I never expected to find out this. After my talk with Karen, I couldn't sit still. I went back to the penthouse, locked myself in the guest room, and started digging. I combed through emails, our shared business files, and every bit of correspondence I could find between Matt and Jessica. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just something, anything, that could make sense of what I'd learned. And then I found it. It was buried deep in our shared cloud storage, in a folder Matt had marked as Old Proposals. At first glance, it looked like any other draft file, project details, investment outlines. But one document caught my eye, a legal agreement I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my stomach twisted. It was a revised shareholder agreement, one that would dilute my ownership of the company significantly, transferring most of the decision-making power to Matt. It wasn't finalized, but there were notes in the margins. One of them read, Jess will make sure he agrees. Jess. My wife. The room spun as everything clicked into place. The late nights. The whispers. The way Matt couldn't seem to stop looking at Jessica at the party. Karen's story about her locking the office door to use Matt's laptop. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. Jessica and Matt were having an affair, and they were trying to steal my share of the company. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the document, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. Matt, my best friend since childhood. Jessica, the woman I'd built my life with. They were planning to destroy everything I'd worked for. Once the shock wore off, anger took its place. I wasn't going to sit back and let them take me for a fool. If they thought I was just going to roll over, they had no idea who they were messing with. The next morning, I met with a lawyer, David, a friend from college who specialized in corporate law. I laid everything out for him, the suspicious document, the changes Matt had tried to make to the deal, and Karen's account of Jessica's behavior. David listened carefully, taking notes as I spoke. When I was finished, he looked at me with a steely expression. Mike, you're right to be worried. If that document goes through, you'll lose control of the company. But we can get ahead of this. How? I asked, my voice tight. We make a safe pillow for you, he said. First, we protect your shares. We'll file a motion with the board to freeze any changes to the ownership structure until this is resolved. Second, we secure your personal assets. If they're planning something bigger, like trying to drag you through a messy divorce, you'll need to make sure your finances are untouchable. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. And what about Jessica and Matt? Can we, I don't know, prove what they're doing? David hesitated. The affair? That's tricky. But if we can show they're conspiring to defraud you, that's a different story. Do you have any other evidence? I thought about it for a moment, then told him about the messages I'd seen between Matt and Jessica and the changes to the shareholder agreement. That's a start, David said. But you'll need more if you want to make this airtight. Keep gathering anything you can, texts, emails, anything that shows they're working together against you. The next few days were a blur of planning. David filed the necessary paperwork to freeze my shares, and we moved a chunk of my personal savings into a trust under my name. I spent every spare moment digging through Jessica's phone records, Matt's emails, and our shared company files, piecing together the puzzle of their betrayal. The more I uncovered, the clearer their plan became. Matt was using Jessica to manipulate me, to push me into agreeing to changes that would strip me of control over the company. And Jessica? I didn't even want to think about her motivations. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I wasn't just going to protect myself, I was going to make sure they couldn't pull this off. They thought they were smart, but they underestimated me. The betrayal burned like a fire in my chest, but it also fueled me. If Jessica and Matt wanted to play games, I was ready. After spending the entire day finalizing protections with David, I was drained but resolute. The safe pillow was in place, my shares were protected, my finances were untouchable, and any sudden moves by Matt or Jessica would trigger legal hellfire. I finally felt like I could breathe, even if it was shallow and bitter. As I walked back into the penthouse that evening, I was greeted by silence. The kids were staying with Alexis for the night, which meant it was just me, Jessica, and Matt, who I assumed had gone home by now. The place was dark except for the faint glow of the pool lights outside. Dropping my keys on the counter, I headed toward the balcony, thinking I might grab a drink and sit out there for a while. But as I stepped closer, I heard noises, soft laughter, hushed voices, and the unmistakable sound of water splashing. Curious and already on edge, I moved quietly toward the sliding glass door, peering out into the dimly lit pool area. And that's when I saw them. Jessica, perched on the edge of the pool, her body shimmering in the water's reflection, completely bare. Matt was between her legs, his hands gripping her thighs as if the world didn't exist beyond the two of them. Her head was thrown back, her hair cascading over her shoulders, as she moaned loud enough to make my stomach churn. For a moment, I froze, the scene searing itself into my brain. My wife. My best friend. In my pool. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Something inside me snapped. The fury, the betrayal, the humiliation, it all collided in a blinding wave of adrenaline. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the camera. Click. The shutter sound seemed deafening to me, though they didn't hear it over their own noises. I took another photo, and another, each one clearer than the last. Jessica's face, twisted in pleasure. Matt's hands gripping her as if he owned her. The evidence was undeniable, the betrayal laid bare in pixel-perfect clarity. But I wasn't done. I flipped the phone to video mode and hit record. My pulse pounded in my ears as I captured the truth in motion. The soft whispers, the gasps, the way they moved together, it all made my chest tighten like a vice. I didn't confront them. Not yet. That would have been too easy, too loud. Instead, I slipped back into the house, my hands trembling as I sent the photos and video to my private email. I needed to make sure this evidence was untouchable. Once the files were secure, I grabbed my keys and left. My mind was a storm of rage and determination, but I knew exactly where I needed to go, David's office. When I arrived, it was late, but David was still there. The man never stopped working, and tonight, I was grateful for it. He looked up as I stormed into his office, my face pale, my hands shaking. "Mike? What's going on?" I didn't say anything at first. I just handed him my phone and pressed play on the video. David's expression shifted from confusion to shock as he watched. He didn't say a word, just let the video run its course. When it ended, he looked at me, his jaw tight. "This changes everything." "No kidding," I said, my voice hollow. "This isn't just personal anymore," he said, setting the phone down. This is leverage. You've got undeniable proof of their affair. If they try to fight you for the company or your assets, this will destroy them. I want them out, I said, my voice firm. Out of my life, out of my company, out of this penthouse. David nodded, already jotting down notes. We can start with divorce proceedings. With this evidence, you'll have the upper hand in every aspect, financial, legal, everything. As for Matt, we'll bring this to the board. Once they see this, they'll have no choice but to side with you. His credibility is shot. I exhaled, the weight of the day crashing down on me. What's the next step? Leave this with me, David said, holding up the phone. I'll make sure everything is backed up and ready to use when the time comes. For now, keep playing it cool. Don't let them know you know. Easier said than done, I muttered. David gave me a sympathetic look. I know. But trust me, Mike. You've got this. They've played their hand, and now it's your turn. As I left his office, the anger still simmered in my chest, but it was tempered by a new sense of resolve. They thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. The next morning, I woke up early, still feeling the residual fire from the night before. My head was clear, though. I had a plan, and David was already putting it into action. All I needed to do now was keep my composure until the final pieces fell into place. But Jessica had other ideas. I walked into the kitchen to find her standing there, looking unusually radiant for so early in the day. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup on point, and she was sipping a cup of coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. Good morning, she said, her tone too cheerful to be genuine. Morning, I replied flatly, pouring myself a cup. Before I could take a sip, the front door swung open, and in walked Matt and Alexis with the kids trailing behind them. The boys immediately ran off to the living room, completely unaware of the tension that was about to explode in the air. Alexis gave me a quick smile, oblivious to what was coming, but Matt had that smug, self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. It made my blood boil. Jessica clinked her coffee mug on the counter. Well, she said, setting the stage with a dramatic pause, I think it's time we stop pretending. Pretending? Alexis asked, her brow furrowing as she glanced between Jessica and Matt. Jessica placed her hand on Matt's arm, her eyes gleaming. Alexis, Mike, I think it's time you both knew the truth. Matt and I are in love. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Alexis froze, her face pale as the realization hit her. What? She whispered, her voice trembling. Jessica stepped closer to Matt, her confidence sickening. We've been seeing each other for months, and it's not just some fling. This is real. And Mike, well, it's time for you to face the facts. You've lost. You can say goodbye to the firm because, as of today, it doesn't belong to you anymore. I stared at her, my face unreadable. Matt looked at me with that same smug grin, as if he'd already won. Alexis, however, broke into sobs, covering her face with her hands. You've been sleeping with Jessica? She cried, turning on Matt. How could you do this to me? Matt rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed by her reaction. Alexis, don't make this more dramatic than it needs to be. This is just how things are now. You'll get over it. Jessica, emboldened by his confidence, turned back to me. Mike, let's not drag this out. You can fight all you want, but the firm is mine now. You're done. That was my cue. I took a slow sip of my coffee, then set the mug down with deliberate calm. You sure about that? Jessica blinked, confused by my tone. What are you talking about? Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I walked over and opened it to find the postman holding an envelope. Thanks, I said, taking the documents and closing the door. I turned back to the group, unfolding the papers with deliberate slowness. Jessica and Matt watched me, their smug expressions faltering. These, I said, holding up the papers, are court orders. As of last night, all of our company's assets are frozen. Every bank account, every share, every deal, everything is locked down. No one can move a cent without my permission. Matt's face fell. What? he snapped, stepping forward. That's not possible. I guess you didn't see this coming, I interrupted, smirking now. Oh, and there's more. Any attempt to make changes to the ownership structure without my explicit consent? That's been legally blocked too. Jessica's face twisted in shock and fury. You can't do this, she spat. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, but I can. And I did. You thought you could stab me in the back, take everything I've worked for, and waltz out of here scot-free? Not a chance. Alexis, still sobbing, turned to Matt, her voice breaking. You planned this? With her? Matt opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. The color drained from his face as he realized his plan had crumbled before it even started. Jessica, however, wasn't done. She marched up to me, her voice dripping with venom. You think you're so smart, don't you? Freezing the assets doesn't change anything. Matt and I are together now, and we'll find another way. I leaned in, my voice low and cold. Good luck with that. Because the next step is me taking both of you to court. For fraud. For conspiracy. And for being absolute trash human beings. Jessica's bravado cracked, and she stumbled back toward Matt, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. Alexis, meanwhile, stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. As for me, I grabbed my coffee and headed to the balcony, leaving Jessica and Matt standing in the ruins of their grand plan. The legal battle that followed was long and grueling, but in the end I won. David worked tirelessly, presenting the undeniable evidence of fraud and conspiracy. The court sided with me, upholding my ownership of my share of the company. But by that point, the damage was done. The company Matt and I had built together was tainted by the betrayal and scandal. We agreed that the best thing to do was to sell it off, split the proceeds, and move on with our lives. The same went for the penthouse. Neither of us could bear to stay in it, surrounded by memories of what we'd lost. The sale went through quickly, and the money was divided 4 ways: Jessica, Matt, Alexis, and me. But the largest portion went to the boys, placed in trust funds that would set them up for life. It was the least we could do for them after everything we'd torn apart. On the last day in the penthouse, Matt and I found ourselves alone in the empty living room. The furniture was gone, the walls bare, the echoes of laughter and arguments replaced by an oppressive silence. Matt broke it first. So this is it, he said, his voice heavy. Yeah, I replied, leaning against the window, looking out at the skyline. The view we used to dream about when we were just a couple of kids with big plans. He walked over, his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression a mix of guilt and sadness. Mike, I don't even know where to start. I messed up. Big time. And I know there's no fixing it. I turned to face him, my chest tightening. You didn't just mess up, Matt. You destroyed everything. Our friendship, our company, our families, everything we built. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I know I did. I don't have an excuse, man. I was selfish, and I let myself believe I could have it all without thinking about what I was throwing away. You didn't just throw it away, I said, my voice breaking slightly. You threw me away. You were my brother, Matt. You were supposed to have my back, not stab it. He looked down, his shoulders slumping. I regret it. More than you'll ever know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I stared at him, the weight of years of friendship and betrayal pressing down on me. For a moment, we stood there in silence, 2 men who had once shared everything, now standing in the rubble of what we'd destroyed. Finally, I stepped forward and pulled him into a hug. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't forgiving, but it was something. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. For whatever part one played in this. For not seeing it sooner. For not being enough to stop it. Matt pulled back, his eyes red but his face set with determination. You didn't do anything wrong, Mike. This is all on me. But I'm going to try to be better, for my kid, for myself. I'll never forget what I did to you, though. Never. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We stood there for a moment longer before Matt grabbed his bag and headed for the door. "Take care, Mike," he said, pausing at the threshold. "You too, Matt," I replied. And just like that, he was gone. Jessica and I finalized our divorce soon after. She moved to a smaller house across town, and I bought a quiet place in the suburbs. Alexis decided to move back to her hometown with her son, hoping for a fresh start. As for me, I threw myself into rebuilding. I started consulting for smaller startups, helping them avoid the mistakes Matt and I had made. The money from the sale of the company gave me freedom, but it was the quiet moments with my son that gave me peace. Life moved on, but the scars remained. I'd lost a lot: my marriage, my best friend, the company I'd poured my soul into. But I'd also gained something: clarity, strength, a deeper understanding of what mattered most. On the rare occasions Matt and I crossed paths, we exchanged polite nods but nothing more. The wounds were too fresh, the memories too raw. But deep down, I hoped that one day, we'd both find the closure we needed. For now, though, it was time to start over. A new chapter, a new life. One step at a time.